My name is Claire Matthews. I'm the oldest daughter, the responsible one, the one who paid her own college tuition, helped with bills, and never made a scene at family dinners. But last Thanksgiving, my mother stood up, raised her glass, and said, "Let's toast the only child who ever made us proud." She was smiling when she said it. Her hand didn't shake. Her eyes didn't flicker toward me. The room applauded before I could even sit down. There was no plate for me, no chair, just an empty spot between champagne flutes and perfect people. I was standing, holding my coat, watching them celebrate a lie. Have you ever been in a room full of family and still felt like furniture, like no matter what you did, you'd always be invisible because they chose someone else to love louder? If that hits somewhere deep, then I want you to stay with me. This isn't a story about jealousy. It's a story about truth betrayal and what happens when the quiet one finally speaks. If you've ever felt unseen, hit like. Subscribe if you're ready for the rest. Share this with someone who needs to remember being quiet doesn't mean being weak. They had a place for everyone. Silver cutlery, name cards in cursive, little napkins folded like swans. But not for me. No plate, no name, no seat. I stood there watching Mom fill Ryan's glass like he was a king, smiling at him the way she used to smile at me when I was 5, and still useful. No one said anything. No one looked surprised. It was like they'd planned it, like they'd finally stopped pretending. So I didn't sit. I didn't force my way in. I just stood still, coat on my arm, my heart doing that slow sinking thing. You know that feeling when you realize you're not just forgotten, you've been erased not by strangers, by your own blood. It didn't happen all at once. It built over time, quietly, smile by smile, shrug by shrug. And on that night, in a room full of clapping hands and crystal glasses, I stopped making excuses for them and started remembering everything. It started 3 years ago. Ryan had just launched his startup, some crypto app he barely understood, but it sounded shiny, disruptive. Everyone acted like he'd invented oxygen. At the same time, I had clawed my way up to vice president at a finance firm. 10 years, no shortcuts, no spotlight. But when Mom heard about Ryan's company, she lit up like he was saving the family name. "Ryan's going to put us on the map," she said, as if I hadn't built anything, as if I was just filler. Still, I helped him. I didn't brag, didn't ask for anything in return. I loaned him $60,000, quietly, without interest, without paperwork, because that's what family does, right? You give when they ask, you trust without proof, and you pray they won't use your love as leverage. For a while, I believed I was doing the right thing. That sacrifice would mean something. But months passed, and then years. No repayment, no thank you, just silence and new posts on Instagram. First, it was a Tesla, then a trip to Tulum, smiling poolside with his team holding cocktails like victory. Next came a $4,000 espresso machine, captioned CEO fuel. Still nothing from Ryan, no updates, no mention of the loan. And I stayed quiet. At first, because I believed he'd come around. Then, because I didn't want to make it awkward. Then, because I knew it wouldn't matter. At every family gathering, Mom would beam at his latest milestone like he'd won a Nobel. Ryan talked. Everyone listened. I spoke. And Mom scrolled through her phone. Didn't even nod when I mentioned my promotion. Dad said, "You've always been fine. Let your brother shine." Fine, like scaffolding, like something necessary to build around but never meant to be seen. So I stopped trying, but I started paying attention. Because silence doesn't mean you're blind. Sometimes it means you're watching more clearly than anyone expects. The first clue came in an email. Ryan accidentally CC'd me. It was meant for one of his investors. In it, he claimed he had over 50,000 users. I knew for a fact he barely had 200. The numbers weren't just off, they were fiction. I stared at the screen, my coffee going cold in my hand. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a marketing stretch, something he'd fix. But then I checked the business registry. 2 LLCs, registered under both our names, except I never signed anything. My signature was there. But it wasn't mine. He'd forged it, used my name. Attached it to shell companies I had no knowledge of, both traced to offshore accounts. That's when the silence inside me cracked. Not with rage, but with clarity. This wasn't just carelessness, it was theft. Intentional. Calculated. And the worst part, he didn't even think I'd notice. Or maybe he counted on the fact that I wouldn't do anything if I did. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I started printing. Every document, every email, every transaction I could trace. I built a folder, quiet, neat, airtight. Then I called Emily. We hadn't spoken in years. She was a friend from law school, now working white-collar crime for the DOJ. I didn't give her the whole story, just enough. She paused on the phone, then said, "Give me a month." I gave her 3. In those months, I went to every dinner, every birthday, every family brunch, played the part, smiled on cue. I watched them drink Ryan's lies like champagne. And he grew bolder, louder. He told stories about scaling fast, about round 2 funding. Mom glowed when he spoke. Dad nodded like he finally saw a legacy. No one asked me anything. No one noticed my silence, but silence has teeth. And I was sharpening mine behind every smile. Then came the announcement. Ryan stood at the center of the table, his voice full of practiced humility. He was taking the company public. Mom gasped, actually gasped, then pulled out a bottle of champagne she'd been saving for something big. They cheered, poured glasses like they were toasting royalty. Dad clapped him on the back, said, "We always knew you'd be the one." I sat there, hands folded, words buried, watching a house being built on rot. They had no idea what was coming. That night, after everyone left, I made my final move. An envelope. Sent express to Ryan's lead investor. Inside, forged documents, bank transfers, IP theft reports, the LLC trail, and one short note handwritten, "Ask him who really owns the code." I sealed it. No rage, no regret, just the same steady hands that once wired him $60,000 in good faith. This time I was giving him something else, accountability. By Thanksgiving, it had begun. Ryan's accounts were frozen. His investors went silent. The SEC had questions. The IRS had more. He didn't know it was me, not yet. But the unraveling had started, and he could feel it. That night the family gathered like always. Candles lit, turkey carved, the same old traditions wrapped around a lie that was starting to bleed. Ryan still showed up in his designer coat, grinning like nothing was wrong. Mom beamed at him like the glow could cover the cracks. My place at the table, still missing, no plate, no name card, just space. Again. And then she said it, the same sentence, word for word. "Let's raise a glass to the only child who ever made us proud." Her voice bright. Her eyes locked on him. The room clapped. Again. And I stood. Not because I wanted attention, but because I had finally stopped asking for space and started taking it. I turned to leave. Same as last year. Same empty chair. Same hollow applause. But this time, my father's voice cut through the clapping. Low, sharp, icy. "Wait," he said. Then softer. "Tell them what you did." The room fell still. I looked at him, then at Ryan, his smile fading, eyes flicking unsure. No one else moved. No one breathed. So I walked back, each step slow, measured, unapologetic. I set my purse on the table, felt the polished wood beneath my fingers, heard the quiet crack under the weight of truth. Then I reached inside, pulled out a single folder. Thick, heavy, unlabeled, slid it across the linen tablecloth toward Ryan. He stared at it. Didn't touch it. Mom asked, "What is this?" I didn't answer, just looked at my brother. "Go ahead," I said. "Open it." His hand hovered, then landed, then turned the first page, and I watched his world begin to fold. He flipped the first page, then the next. His eyes darted, jaw clenched, fingers trembling slightly. Statements, wire transfers, screenshots of inflated user data, the forged LLC papers, my signature copied, traced, then stamped on something I never touched. And at the end, a notarized affidavit from the Department of Justice. Silence pressed against the walls, thick, heavy, watching. Ryan opened his mouth. "I didn't," he started. I cut in. You did, I said. Voice calm, even, cold. You lied, you stole, and you built your little kingdom on the belief that no one would ever call you out. Mom's face twisted, confused, furious. You set him up, she hissed. I looked at her. Not angry, just done. No, he set me up. I just made sure someone was watching this time. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't need to, because truth when dropped in a room full of illusions doesn't have to shout. It echoes. I turned to Dad. He looked stunned. Not angry, just lost. You always said I was cold, I told him. Strategic, unemotional, like that was a flaw. He didn't reply, didn't blink. Just sat there, hands folded in his lap. Then I looked at Mom. Her eyes were glassy, but not from tears, from disbelief, from the sudden shift of power she never saw coming. And you, I said, taught me love came with conditions. Be quiet, be useful, don't make waves. That was the currency, and I paid in full, for years. Well, I said this was mine, my condition. Mom opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. Just 1 inch of silence. Enough. Then I turned back to Ryan, his face pale now, throat tight. I leaned in just enough for him to hear, you wanted to build an empire. You should have known foundations built on lies never hold. I didn't yell. Didn't need to. The collapse had already started. I picked up my purse, tucked the empty folder back inside, snapped it shut. No one said a word. The air felt thinner, like someone had opened a window in the middle of winter. Ryan still hadn't moved. He was staring at the table like the documents might disappear if he blinked slow enough. Mom sat frozen, a hand still clutching her untouched wine glass. Dad's eyes stayed on his lap. So I walked, past the candles, past the turkey no one was eating, past the clinking glasses that had once toasted the wrong child, and this time no one followed. No one called my name. No one asked me to stop, because they couldn't. Not anymore. That was the moment I realized I hadn't just exposed him. I had freed myself from the role I never agreed to, from the silence they mistook for weakness, from the table that always had space for lies but never for me. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't have to. It was already closed. It's been 6 months. Ryan's been indicted 3 counts of fraud, 1 count of identity theft. He's facing up to 10 years. His lawyers are scrambling. His name's been stripped from every press release, every company page that once called him visionary. He hasn't called, hasn't messaged. Maybe he knows there's nothing left to say. Mom tried reaching out. She left a voicemail, her voice low, trembling. I deleted it before the end. Dad sent a letter. No apology, just confusion. A single line that said, you didn't have to go that far, but how far is too far when you've been walking for years in the opposite direction of love? I feel nothing. Not guilt, not regret, just clarity. Because when someone rewrites your story and calls it family, you have 2 choices. Let it stand. Or write the truth yourself. I chose the second one, and I'd do it again, every time. People ask if it was worth it. If I ever miss them, if I'd take it back, I don't. Because some rooms were never meant for you even if you helped build the walls. And sometimes, the only way to silence a room that's ignored you for years is to burn down the stage they built for someone else. Not out of spite, but because you finally see it was never yours to begin with. I wasn't the child they toasted. I wasn't the one with the champagne or applause. I was the one in the hallway, watching, remembering, waiting for the moment when truth could speak for itself. And when it did, I didn't need to scream. I just told the truth. That was enough. So, no, I don't miss them. What I miss never really existed. And what I have now is mine. Not borrowed, not given with conditions, not earned through silence, just mine. And that's more than they ever offered. Growing up, I thought love had to be earned. That being the oldest meant being the anchor, the fixer, the one who never needed praise. Ryan was chaos wrapped in charm. He failed upward, made messes, then smiled through the cleanup, and they loved him for it. Said he had spirit, said he was going places. I was stability. I showed up, paid my way, held things together when he disappeared for weeks. But no one clapped for that. There were no toasts for consistency, no standing ovation for responsibility, only quiet expectations and louder disappointment whenever I asked for something more. At some point, I stopped asking, started believing maybe love was just something some people got for free and others had to beg for in silence. Ryan was the golden boy, heir by default, crowned not by merit but by attention, and I was the foundation they stood on until they forgot I was ever part of the house. But forgetting me was their first mistake. It didn't happen overnight. Being erased, I mean. It was slow, casual, like water wearing down stone, a missed birthday call, a compliment given to Ryan for something I did, photos where I was cropped out, jokes that made me the punchline, then followed by "don't be so sensitive." Mom stopped asking about my job. Dad stopped noticing when I wasn't there. At first I thought I was imagining it, that maybe I'd grown too distant, too busy, too cold. But no, they just stopped seeing me. Not because I vanished, but because Ryan took up all the light. And they preferred it that way. It's easier to praise the son who dazzles than to acknowledge the daughter who endures. So I became the scaffolding, visible only during construction, forgotten when the structure stood. But I didn't forget. Every slight, every silence, every time they reached for him and stepped over me to do it, I kept it all, and one day it would become the foundation of something else entirely. So I stopped talking, stopped offering pieces of myself to people who never looked up long enough to hold them. But I didn't disappear. I watched. Ryan talked louder, got flashier, new watches, new jargon, more words with less meaning. He told stories that didn't add up, metrics that changed from dinner to dinner, partnerships that only existed in his head, and every time he spoke, I nodded. I let him believe I was still the quiet sister in the corner, too tired to care. But I was listening. Every lie, every inflated claim, every borrowed phrase he passed off as brilliance, I logged it. Because the thing about being invisible is that people forget you're in the room. They speak freely. They get sloppy. And Ryan, he got very sloppy. He didn't know I'd traced every transaction, saved every email, verified every user count against his bold, shiny lies. I wasn't just watching him. I was watching what happens when someone builds a life on borrowed truth. The deeper I dug, the more reckless it looked. Shell companies tied to each other through addresses that didn't exist. Invoices marked paid with no record of actual service. And my name, it kept showing up. On contracts I never saw, on documents I never signed. He'd built his empire on a foundation of paper lies and forged trust. But the part that cut deepest wasn't the money, wasn't even the signature he stole. It was how certain he was that I wouldn't do anything. Like I was still the same sister who kept his secrets, cleaned up his messes, defended him at 10, 15, 25. Like I'd stay quiet forever. He wore confidence like a tailored suit, walked into rooms as if the world owed him space. But the crown he placed on his head, it wasn't earned. It was taken. Stolen from the people who built the staircase he climbed without looking down. And now that crown was beginning to crack, because someone had finally started reading the fine print. I kept gathering. Late nights, spreadsheets, PDFs, printouts, cross-checking statements until my eyes blurred. I wasn't angry anymore, just focused. The folder grew thicker. Every lie added weight. Emily checked in every few weeks. Quiet voice, sharp mind. She knew what this was. She said, "Let the cracks spread. The more pressure you apply, the more truth leaks through." So I waited. 3 months of pretending, of smiling through family dinners, of letting Ryan toast to his own brilliance while I nodded along. He told Dad he had new investors lined up, told Mom he might speak at a tech summit, told me nothing. He never even made eye contact anymore. Maybe he felt it. The shift, the distance that wasn't just silence but preparation. I played my part, laughed when expected, clapped when required, but underneath every smile was a countdown. Not to revenge, to release. Because this wasn't just about him. It was about me finally choosing not to carry what wasn't mine to hold. By the end of the 3rd month, everything was in place. Emily had what she needed. The case was strong, tight, clean, undeniable. I stared at the folder one last time before sealing it. All the forged contracts, the wire trails, the fake user counts, screenshots, timestamps, proof he couldn't explain away. And at the top, my name not as a victim, but as the one who stopped it. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel vindicated. Just ready. Ready to let it go. Ready to let the truth move without me. Ready to stop cleaning up someone else's storm. That night, I dropped the envelope into the FedEx box on the corner of 5th and Maple. No one saw me. No dramatic music, no lightning in the sky, just a quiet click as it disappeared into the slot. And that was it. The beginning of the end. Not for me, I'd already made peace. But for Ryan, it was the moment his story stopped being fantasy and started becoming evidence. 2 weeks later, Ryan made his big announcement. Standing at the head of the dinner table, champagne in one hand, that same practiced smile on his face. "We're going public," he said. "Officially!" The room erupted. Mom gasped like it was a proposal. Dad stood to shake his hand. Cousins I hadn't seen in years raised their glasses without hesitation. They didn't know. Not yet. But the letter had been delivered. The clock had started, and Ryan, he was still playing the role, still selling the fantasy. He thanked everyone for believing in him, talked about legacy, talked about the Matthews name, said things like next level, like generational wealth. I sat at the edge of the table, quiet, steady, watching. Mom turned to me, once eyes bright with pride. "He's going to change everything," she whispered. I nodded, because she was right. Everything was already changing, just not the way she imagined. That same night, after the clapping faded and the plates were cleared, I went home. No drama. No goodbye hugs, just the quiet of my apartment and a folder waiting on the counter. One last check, everything in order. Then I slipped it into a fresh envelope, addressed it by hand. Ryan's lead investor, the one with real money, the one who'd already been asking questions, inside financial statements, false user data, forged signatures, LLC documents, and one final note written in black ink on plain white paper. Ask him who really owns the code. No name, no threat, just truth. I sealed it, pressed the edges down slow. Steady hands, dry eyes. This wasn't revenge, this was restoration. I was no longer asking to be seen. I was showing what happens when you pretend someone like me isn't watching. I dropped the envelope off the next morning. And just like that, the truth had a new address. And Ryan's countdown was no longer mine to keep. It started quietly. First a delay in one of Ryan's press releases, then a canceled investor call. No explanation, just rescheduling. He looked tense at dinner, checked his phone more than usual, laughed too loud, drank too fast. Mom didn't notice, or didn't want to. She was busy planning a celebration, some kind of pre-IPO family brunch. She asked me to help. I said yes, because I wanted a front row seat when the cracks finally showed. By the following week, 2 investors had gone silent. One pulled out entirely. Ryan blamed market jitters, said crypto was always volatile, said he had backups, but his voice had changed. That easy charm starting to rust. I sat across from him, slicing into dry turkey, watching his hand shake slightly as he poured the wine. He looked up, caught my eye for half a second. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I just smiled. The kind of smile you give someone right before the storm they said would never come finally arrives. In public, Ryan kept the act alive. Posted photos of meetings, captioned them, "Big moves coming," shared a screenshot of a news article, an interview he never actually gave. The comments poured in. Everyone still believed. But behind the scenes, things were unraveling. Bank accounts flagged. A formal inquiry launched. Whispers in investor circles, questions he couldn't dodge much longer. He stopped answering Mom's calls as quickly. Stopped showing up early to dinners. Stopped smiling with his whole face. But still she refused to see it. "He's just stressed," she told me. "You don't know the pressure he's under." No, I knew. I knew exactly what pressure looked like because I had carried it for years while no one applauded. And now he was feeling it for the first time. Not the kind that breaks you, the kind that reveals you. And what was underneath Ryan's polished shell wasn't resilience. It was desperation stitched together with borrowed confidence, and the stitches were starting to split. Thanksgiving came again. Same table, same candles, same perfect plates lined in gold, and somehow the same script. No one mentioned the delays, the rumors, the way Ryan's name had quietly disappeared from a few websites. They all acted like nothing was wrong, like the collapse wasn't already beneath their feet. I showed up late, not out of spite, just because I could. My seat wasn't there. Again, no plate, no name card, just that empty space like a punctuation mark. And then, as if nothing had changed, Mom stood up, lifted her glass. "Let's raise a toast," she said, "to the only child who ever made us proud." Her voice carried. Ryan sat straighter, smiled just enough, but his hands, they were shaking now. The room clapped, almost on cue, and I stood, not because I was invited, not because I needed to, but because it was time. This year, I wasn't walking away. This year, I had brought something they couldn't ignore. I pushed back my chair. Slow, steady. No one looked at me. Not yet. They were too busy watching Ryan, waiting for his modest shrug, his usual speech about hard work and vision. But before he could speak, Dad's voice cut through the room. Low, flat, sharp. "Claire," he said, "tell them what you did." Forks froze midair, napkins paused halfway to lips. Ryan's eyes snapped toward me, pale, alert. Mom blinked, confused, not worried. She didn't know. Not yet. I turned to face them. "Are you sure I asked?" Dad nodded once, expression unreadable. So I reached into my bag, felt the familiar weight of the folder, the quiet hum beneath the leather, pulled it out, set it down on the table next to the untouched pie, slid it toward Ryan. "Go on," I said. "Open it." He didn't move. Mom leaned forward. "What is this?" I didn't answer. Because some truths don't need introduction. They carry their own names on every page. Ryan reached for the folder like it might burn him. He opened it slowly, lifting the first page with fingers that suddenly looked unsure. His eyes scanned the top line, stopped, then moved faster. Statement, transaction, shell company, offshore account. The room was silent. No one breathed. I watched his throat tighten, watched the sweat bloom just beneath his collar. He flipped to the next page, and the next, each one heavier than the last. Then came the signature line, forged, clean, precise. And finally the affidavit from the Department of Justice. Stamped, signed, real. He looked up, face drained, hands shaking. He started. I didn't let him finish. "You did. No anger, no performance, just truth stated plainly. You lied, you stole, and you thought no one would catch you because they were too busy clapping." I turned to the rest of the table. "You applauded so loudly you didn't hear the damage. Now they would." Mom stood up so fast her chair screeched against the floor. "You set him up," she snapped. Voice sharp, eyes wide like betrayal couldn't possibly wear his face. I didn't flinch, didn't raise my voice. "No," I said. "He set me up. I just made sure someone was watching." She looked at Ryan, then back at me as if her brain couldn't connect the two. But the pages didn't lie. The paper was louder than any excuse. I turned to Dad. "You always said I was cold, strategic, unemotional." I gave him the same calm stare he once gave me when he said, "Let your brother shine." "You were right," I said. "Turns out that's what saved me." Then I looked at Mom. "And you taught me that love came with conditions. Smile right, speak less, don't make problems." I stepped closer to the table, placed a hand on the folder. "This is my condition, the one you never thought I had." The room stayed quiet. Truth doesn't need to shout to cut. Ryan still hadn't spoken. He stared down at the documents like they were written in a language he used to understand, but couldn't anymore. I didn't pity him, because he built this, not in one day, but in layers. Lie after lie, all dressed up as ambition. "You wanted to build an empire," I said, "but you forgot foundations built on lies don't last." He finally looked at me, eyes glassy, mouth open, nothing came out. Mom sat back down, Slow, wordless, like the weight of truth had finally touched her spine. Dad still hadn't moved, hands folded, face unreadable. I stood straighter. I didn't burn anything down, I said. I just took my name off what never should have had it. No one defended him. Not this time. The silence that used to smother me now wrapped around him. And for once, he had no script, no charm, no applause, only evidence, and a sister who refused to disappear. I closed the folder, tucked it back into my bag like it weighed nothing at all. No one stopped me. No one said my name. Ryan sat still, shoulders caved in like the room had finally stopped orbiting him. Mom looked down at her empty plate. Dad blinked slow, as if waking from a dream he never meant to be in. I turned and walked toward the door. My heels clicked against the floor, a sound that used to feel too loud, too sharp. Tonight, it sounded like freedom. I didn't look back, because there was nothing left to see. No more convincing, no more waiting to be chosen. That version of me, the quiet one, the one who gave and waited, she stayed at the table. I walked out as someone else, someone who didn't need permission to take up space, someone who understood that family isn't defined by who claps the loudest, but by who stands when the clapping stops. And this time, no one followed, because deep down they knew I was never coming back. Days passed, then weeks. I expected silence, got voicemails instead. Mom left one, her voice soft, uncertain, like she wasn't sure who she was calling. I didn't listen to the end, just deleted it. No curiosity, no ache. Dad sent a letter, plain envelope, no return address, inside one sentence. You didn't have to go that far. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just that quiet accusation parents reserve for the child who finally says enough. I folded the letter once, then again, dropped it into the trash without a sound. Because this wasn't about going too far, it was about finally going somewhere real. They wanted me to keep playing my role, silent, strong, and visible. The reliable daughter who swallowed pain so they could stay comfortable. But I had nothing left to swallow, no more space to shrink into. If they wanted peace, they could start with honesty. And if they couldn't offer that, then silence would have to do. I'd learned to live in it before, now I chose it. The house was quieter than I remembered, but not in a sad way, just clean, still. No phone vibrating with drama, no sudden visits, no one asking me to fix things I didn't break. I stopped checking Ryan's socials, didn't need to watch the unraveling. The damage was already documented, signed, sealed, and out of my hands. Emily updated me once, said the case was moving forward, said I might be contacted. I thanked her, but I wasn't waiting on justice anymore. I'd already found mine, in boundaries held, in silence kept, in knowing I did what none of them had the courage to. Some nights I sit by the window, cup of tea cooling in my hand, and I wonder, was I ever really part of that family, or was I just the structure they leaned on until it no longer served them? Either way, I don't feel empty, just lighter. Sometimes peace doesn't come with closure or apology. Sometimes it just comes when you finally stop asking for a seat at the wrong table. The news came on a Wednesday. Quiet headline, tidy language. Ryan Matthews indicted on charges of fraud and identity theft. 3 counts for fraud, 1 for forging my name. Maximum sentence, 10 years. There was no press conference, no cameras outside his apartment, just a name that once sparkled now sitting in black ink beneath words like federal and criminal. Friends started backing away, the same ones who toasted him at every launch, every fake milestone. Mom didn't call this time. Neither did Dad. They didn't need to. Everything had already been said or left unsaid for too long. I read the article twice. Not out of satisfaction, just finality. Then I closed my laptop, washed the dishes, fed the cat, because that was the truth about endings. They rarely arrive with fireworks. They land in the ordinary, settle into silence, and this one, it didn't roar, it didn't scream, it just arrived, exactly when it was supposed to. No revenge, no regret. Only reality finally catching up to the story he wrote in lies. People ask what he really took from me. Money, sure. 60,000 I'll never see again. But that's not the part that stuck. It was trust, time. The years I spent believing family meant protection, believing silence was strength. He took my name and stamped it on lies. He took my loyalty and wore it like armor while he built something hollow. And worse, he took space. Space I could have filled with something better. With peace, with real connection, with people who didn't measure love by usefulness. But here's what he didn't take: my voice, my clarity, my refusal to stay small just to keep others comfortable. He thought I'd crumble when the truth came out, thought I'd be too ashamed to stand in the wreckage, but I wasn't the one who built it. He was. I just made sure everyone could finally see what was behind the curtain, and what they saw wasn't power, wasn't brilliance. Just a man sitting on a throne made of paper and borrowed names. I stopped explaining myself. To friends who asked if it was too personal, to relatives who whispered, family is family no matter what. I used to defend my choices, used to soften the edges so no one felt too uncomfortable with my truth. But not anymore, because telling the truth doesn't make you cruel. It makes you clear. And clarity, that's what they never expected from me. They liked me softer, quiet, easy to dismiss. But I'm not here to make anyone feel better about the damage they ignored. Not here to wrap betrayal in pretty words. Ryan betrayed me. He used me, and they let him. That's the truth. And if that makes someone shift in their chair, look away, change the subject. So be it. Let them squirm. I lived in that discomfort for far too long to protect people who never protected me. Now I protect myself. And the version of me who stayed silent for years, she's not here anymore. She finally walked out the door. Dad used to say, loyalty means sticking with your blood even when it hurts. But I've learned real loyalty isn't silence. It isn't covering for someone while they burn everything down behind you. It isn't letting your name become collateral in someone else's gamble. Loyalty without honesty is just obedience. And obedience without respect is survival. That's what I was doing for years. Surviving, keeping peace that only protected his chaos. They called it love, I called it duty. But love shouldn't ask you to stay small, to stay quiet, to stay broken just so someone else can shine. I was loyal, too loyal, to people who didn't ask questions because the answers might disrupt their comfort. So no, I don't feel guilty for telling the truth. I feel free because choosing myself wasn't betrayal. It was finally belonging to someone who wouldn't lie to me. Me. And that kind of loyalty, the one you build with yourself, that's the kind they never taught me to value. I used to imagine it, the day they'd finally see me, not for what I endured, but for what I built. No spotlight, no champagne, just one honest sentence. We're proud of you too. It never came. Not when I graduated early. Not when I paid off mom's surgery. Not when I worked 2 jobs and still made it to every family event on time, gift in hand. The applause was always for him, even when the music was mine. And maybe that's the part I mourned the longest. Not the money, not the betrayal, but the quiet. The absence of recognition for a life held together without needing rescue. But I've stopped waiting for that sound. Because the applause I deserved was never theirs to give. It belongs to the version of me that kept going even when no one clapped. She earned it. And now in the stillness of truth, she finally hears it not from a room full of people, but from within. And this time, that's enough. I don't reach out anymore. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, not for the small excuses I used to cling to just to stay visible. I let them feel the absence, let them sit with the version of me they ignored for years, not to punish, not to hurt, but because sometimes distance is the only way to measure what was real. Mom tried calling again last month, left a voicemail. Her voice sounded older, tired. She said, I don't know what to say, but I hope you're okay. I didn't respond, not because I'm cruel, but because I've learned not every door deserves reopening. Some stay closed because healing happens on the other side of silence. I let her miss me. Let them all wonder where I went. Because if they ever really wanted to find me, they'd start by looking not at what I did, but at what they refused to see. And until then, I remain where I am, whole, clear, and finally unavailable. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed quiet, if I'd swallowed one more lie, smiled through one more dinner, let Ryan stand at the top while I held the ladder steady. Would they have ever seen me, or would I have vanished completely, a name they used but never remembered? But that's not the story I chose. I didn't set out to destroy him. I set out to save myself. Because sometimes the only way to silence a room that's spent years talking over you is to burn down the stage they built for someone else. Not in anger, not in spite, but because you finally understand you were never meant to be the background. And the fire. It wasn't rage. It was truth finally given oxygen. I didn't become the villain. I became the ending they never expected. The one they wrote out too soon. The one they never clapped for. The one who didn't need applause to know her own power. They toasted the wrong child. But I lit the match. It's quiet now. Not lonely, just clear. I wake up without waiting for someone to remember me. I move through my days without shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. No more proving, no more explaining, no more performing for love that only showed up when I disappeared. Ryan's facing trial. The headlines are colder now. Investors call him a cautionary tale. But that part of the story no longer belongs to me. I've walked out of it, left the ashes behind. This is the part where I build something new, not in reaction, not in rage, but in truth. Something solid, quiet, free. And if you've ever felt like me, overlooked, erased, used only when convenient, then I hope my voice feels like a window cracking open. Because you don't need their seat, their toast, their approval. You only need your own name spoken with honesty. I wasn't the child they toasted, but I was the one they never saw coming, and now they don't get to forget me. Not ever again. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever been the one they overlooked, the one who walked away instead of breaking, I'd love to hear your story too. Drop a comment. Tell me what part stayed with you. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and unapologetically honest, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because this wasn't the last truth I'll tell. Not by far.